Hello, hello, and welcome to this free GMAT prep hour. Hi, everyone. Now, as you are joining, if you could just say hello in chat and tell me where you're located. I always love to see where people are located from these. Hi. We get so many people from so many different places. It's really fun. Oh, Toronto, awesome. I think that's East Coast time as well. I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan right now. Oh, Bogota. Oh my gosh. LAMIC. We're from all over the place. This is absolutely wonderful. See, this is one of my favorite parts of doing this. My other favorite part is talking about the GMAT, which is what we're going to do for the next hour. A GID. Oh my gosh, very observant. I was in LA. I have since relocated to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm excited. I'm excited about the opportunity. I'm a little bit torn, right? Because the winter is coming up in, I don't know, a few months. I'm concerned. We'll see how it goes. I'm from the Midwest originally, though. I grew up in Indiana, so I know what to expect. I just have been away from it for quite a while here. All right. Oh my gosh, IU Bloomington. My brother went there. Wow. I wish I could come to Columbia. That would be amazing. I actually speak Spanish as well, so I would fit in perfectly. I don't know if I speak perfectly still, though. I studied in Spain. It was many years ago, but I'm sure I'd pick it back up. You miss Steak and Shake? What do you think of this? Steak and Shake is pretty great. They have pretty great cheesy fries, which no one else makes cheese fries that are quite like theirs. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, this is so much fun, guys. Please continue to keep your comments coming because I'm certainly going to pay attention to them as I continue throughout the class tonight. I love getting a lot of interaction, so definitely something that I'm aiming for. Send your questions as well. I'll pay attention to those too. Awesome. Let's get started. So, just as a quick aside, we have a ton of free materials out there that are really, really helpful for you to study. Some of you already are aware we do these free prep hours pretty regularly. We have at least a couple per month. We have a ton of other free resources, though, that you should really check out. We have free live classes that we offer. You can attend the first class session of each course, which is really helpful in terms of understanding both data sufficiency and sentence correction content. You can check out our on-demand course for free as well. And then we have a chat forum also where you can go and actually get questions answered from real GMAT instructors. So definitely I would check that out if you have anything specific, maybe a problem that you're really struggling with or something you're uncertain about in terms of your prep. That's an awesome resource to go and check out. We also monitor YouTube comments. So if you are watching this, even in the future, and you have some questions about what you see happening here, then please reach out. We'll definitely get back to you. Excellent. Well, without further ado, tonight's session is something that has been on my mind for a while. So this is really about Quant. We're talking in Quant tonight. I did a reading comp lesson most recently, now Quant. And really what I want to focus on is the process for Quant. So as we're thinking about, like, you only get about 2 minutes per quantitative question, and now you can adjust that a little bit, right? So it's not exactly 2 minutes. You have to figure out how to allocate your time the best, but it's about 2 minutes per question, which is very quick. It's going to feel fast. And I have so many students ask me, how do I get used to this? How do I make sure that I can answer questions within that 2 minute time frame? My answer to them and my answer to you tonight will be process. You have to have a really good process, finely tuned, to make sure that whenever a question comes up, you know exactly what to do. You are prepared. You might not even understand the content exactly, but you have a step-by-step process that you're going to follow to figure out how to solve it. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. That process is called understand, plan, solve. It's something that I do personally. I scored a 760 on the GMAT, so I think that it was extremely successful for me. It's extremely successful for my course students and my tutoring students. This is something that I really try to hammer home to really any GMAT student that I'm speaking with. If you don't have a good process, you're really setting yourself up to not see your score increase. All right. Well, up first, we are going to take a look at exactly what this process looks like. Now, this is just quant tonight, so first we're going to talk about problem solving, and then we're going to talk about data sufficiency. For those of you who are just getting started studying, those are the two different question types. They're in the quantitative section. They're a little bit different from each other, but you're still going to follow a pretty similar process. Yeah, Will, I just saw your question. Any grammatical concepts that are now considered acceptable? I'm going to need you to elaborate just a little bit further on that. Are you asking if anything has changed grammatically over the last couple of years? I'm going to continue to talk about this. Yes. There have been some fine changes. They're not coming to mind to me right now, unfortunately. I know that there are just minute differences though. So there was a specific word change. I think it had to do with the word since that changed recently, where we saw a usage that we hadn't seen before. You're going to see little things like that over time. They're typically not the highest yield topics to keep in mind though. So there haven't been any massive changes in terms of what's being tested. And this is actually, I'm glad that you brought this up, because what you want to focus on in your studies are the things that give you the highest return on your investment, right? So if you think about the topics that really yield you the biggest return, process certainly is one of them. Fine details like that, if you're scoring at a 700 already and you're trying to increase your score from that point, then continue to worry about details. But if you're not, then ultimately I would focus on kind of other things, right? Make sure that you have a really good process for each question type. Make sure that you understand the foundational concepts, and you can go out there and look up lists about the topics that are most frequently tested. All right. Understand, plan, solve. These are extremely helpful concepts to keep in mind, because ultimately this can be useful for any quant question. When you see a quant question come on the screen, the first instinct of most of my students, at least, is to just panic a little bit, right? You see something crazy pop up and you go, ah! And you can give yourself that brief moment of going, ah, but then you have to say to yourself, no, I know what to do. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this, and here's what we're going to do. And having this framework is extremely helpful in just fighting that anxiety and making sure that you just rinse and repeat. You kind of become almost robotic about it as you go throughout the exam. All right, so understand this process is what you're doing as you look at a question. So within the 2 minutes, you're understanding first, then you're planning, and then you're solving. And ideally what's happening is that you're spending more time understanding and planning than you really are even solving. When you understand, the first question you're asking yourself is, what type of question is this? So before you jump into actually answering a question or even developing a plan for that question, you need to ask yourself, what kind of a question am I even looking at here? Then you ask yourself, what kind of information are you being given? What's the question? And what can you jot down on your paper? So ultimately, you're taking time, and you don't even have your pen or your wet erase marker in your hand at this point, maybe. You're literally just taking a moment to understand the information as it's being presented to you. It's a tough prospect, I'll tell you that. A lot of my students want to just jump in and start solving immediately, but that leads you down some not so great paths sometimes in terms of solving the problem. When you do take time to understand, it means that you can come up with a really solid plan that works well for you. So then you're asking yourself, okay, I've taken a moment to understand. Now, what prior knowledge can I apply? Have I seen a problem that's kind of like this one or close enough that it could apply? And your goal isn't necessarily to rack your brain for every problem that you know. It's to have seen things that are similar and then to simply recognize that content, right? Your brain just kind of kicks in on autopilot a little bit. Can you use a West method to solve? Now, when I say West method, I mean these four: working backwards, estimating, smart numbers, or testing cases. These are all really solid methods that don't necessarily involve traditional problem solving techniques. So it's not that just doing the algebra method, it's something a little bit different that usually saves you a lot of time. This is a step that I build into this understand, plan, solve, because if you don't ask yourself this question, oftentimes you lose opportunities to use those quicker methods that are easier for you. The other piece to this too is the fact that you need to practice these things when you are not taking a practice exam and not taking the real exam, right? So if you don't know what these West methods are, absolutely fine. Go out and make sure that you do start to understand them though, because they can be huge time savers. And they don't just save you time, honestly, they save you mental effort. Part of getting through the quant section of the GMAT is really making sure that you guard your mental effort appropriately. It's tough to get through, and if you're not guarding that, then ultimately you can get tired before the end and then slump and you see your score drop simply because you didn't have the endurance to make it through. All right, then the last question you want to ask yourself is, how do you want to organize your work? Ooh, this is so important. So many people come to me and they say, I'm not doing well. How can I get better? And I have them do problems for me and I watch their process. Even when they use understand, plan, solve, sometimes if they're not organized enough in their work, I see everything kind of just go down the drain for them. They understand the information, they have a solid plan, and then their work is disorganized and they can't follow it, and so they get confused. If you notice that that's something that you're struggling with, then get really good at figuring out how to make tables for yourself, right? A table will oftentimes be your friend on the GMAT, at least in the quant section. Don't make tables for verbal. All right. Then when you're solving, it really should become quite simple. As you solve, you're really just working to use that organization that you've already set up, to use the information that you've already taken time to understand. So in the solve step here, you're really just trying to make sure that you're staying focused and staying organized. And this is your chance also to bail if you get stuck. So you have a couple of opportunities actually to bail. If you don't understand the information that you're given, that's a good time to bail. You're not going to come up with a good plan to solve. You're not going to solve that problem. It's just not the problem for you. And that's okay. Not every problem is. Even for me, scoring a 760, I did not answer every problem. There were some that came on the screen, in fact, that I took a look at them and I was like, oof, you are definitely not the one for me. Goodbye. And that's kind of a gift to you because you save time and you can reallocate that to other questions. The next opportunity you have to bail is in the plan phase. So if you understand the information, but you say to yourself, wow, I cannot come up with a good plan to solve this. I'm just spinning in circles here. That's a great opportunity to bail on that question as well. If you're struggling to come up with any kind of a plan or to get organized, it's probably not the question for you. And then finally is if you're just really struggling to solve, right? So these 3 steps not only help you to stay super organized, but they also help you to know, okay, what are my opportunities to move forward with the problem and what are my opportunities to just jump ship and move on to the next chance? Every new problem is a new opportunity. All right. So ultimately, this is a really good point to just make note of this for yourself. I want you to practice using this process throughout class tonight. This is specifically the process for problem solving. So we're just going to take a quick look at the process for data sufficiency. 2 different question types on the GMAT, right? Very, very similar to problem solving. You're still going to understand. The difference is that you're going to understand and plan for the question stem first. Then you're going to understand, plan, and solve for each of the statements. So it's a little bit quicker in terms of what you do for each of those segments, right? But it should be slightly less complex information that you see for each of those sections. Danny, great question. I just saw, how long should each step take? Awesome. You guys are really thinking. Understand and plan ideally should take about a minute, no longer than a minute typically. And then solve, you want to give yourself about a minute to solve as well. Now on the GMAT, everything is in approximations, right? Because sometimes you're going to use a lot more time to understand and plan, and then maybe you need 30 seconds to solve because the steps have become so clear to you at that point. Sometimes it will be reversed where you think, wow, this information is really simple. I have a solid plan. It's going to take me a little while to execute that plan though. Either of those scenarios is okay. Practicing is really what's going to give you an idea for how to allocate that time appropriately. Sometimes I like to have students do minute drills though, where they time themselves, give yourself a minute to understand and plan. You do absolutely no solving whatsoever on a particular problem. And then you give yourself another minute in order to solve. And that's like just a good way for you to practice this process, honestly, and just see how that works for you, whether it's enough time in the understand and plan phase versus solve. All right. The other thing that I want to note here before we move on to some problems is that when you're looking at data sufficiency questions, you really want to organize your paper using a T-chart. If you don't know what a T-chart is, I'm going to show you in just a moment here, but essentially you just draw a T and then you're going to keep track of your statements on one side, one on one side of the T and one on the other side of the T, because you really don't want statement crossover. You really want to keep your work organized and separated. Excellent. So for each statement, the difference here from problem solving too is that you're still going to ask yourself what information you're being given. You're going to ask yourself how it fits in. But when you're solving, instead of looking for a particular solution, you're trying to prove not sufficient. So when you see a particular statement, you're not trying to prove that it is sufficient because that's incredibly hard to do. So you're actually trying to prove that it is not sufficient. If you cannot prove that it's not sufficient, then you assume that it is sufficient after you give it sufficient thought. Did I say sufficient enough times? When you do know, you stop. And that's an important thing to note because I've noticed a lot of students, they want to continue solving, right? They're like, I know that I have enough information, but I just want to double check it. No, if you know you have enough information, you stop there. And then ideally, obviously, you're going to be eliminating. This is true for every question type. So problem solving is true in the verbal section as well. You're not looking for the right answer. You're looking for all the wrong answers and getting rid of those. Okay. Any questions about this before we move on? We've got some fun problems tonight. Fun to me. I am a big proponent too, by the way, of just enjoying the journey of taking the GMAT. If you hate studying for the GMAT, you will probably not see your score increase. So if there's something about it that you hate, it's just like going to the gym, right? I try to make myself go to the gym. If I work out so hard that I hate it, I'm not going back. If you study so hard that you hate it, you're probably not coming back to the GMAT. So make sure that you try to find ways to enjoy it because it truly is a really fun test. It can be. All right. We, my friends, are all going to do a practice problem. Here's the way that this is going to go. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to solve it. Then we're going to break it down together in terms of understand, plan, and solve. And then after that, I'm going to give you my particular thoughts about what exactly those look like and what I thought about in particular. Okay. Ready or not, here we go. Before you start, it's always a good idea to take just a really deep breath. And this is true on the official exam as well. Just one deep, clear breath between each question. Clear anything else out that you may be carrying over in terms of emotions. All right. Moving to the next screen. And your time is going to start right now. That was 2 minutes. Oof. 2 minutes goes by quickly, doesn't it? Okay, most of you have sent me your answers via poll. I still have a couple more that we're waiting for. And the answers, by the way, are literally just all across the board. I have at least a couple of choices for each answer. All right. What we're going to do now is take a look at how to solve this problem. So here's this T chart that I was talking about. We're just going to literally draw a T here. And this is how I'm going to keep track of each of the statements. Now, in chat, what did you understand? What did you notice first about this particular information being presented here? There are no wrong answers, by the way. Yeah, Jessica, nice. It's a yes/no question. For yes/no data sufficiency questions, all you need to be able to do is answer a firm yes or a firm no. Ultimately, if you can do that and not get a sometimes yes, sometimes no for each statement, then it's sufficient. Oh, Jessica, nice. Number of properties, divisibility. Nicholas, I like that. Interesting. So Nicholas, you started with the second statement first then. I love to do that personally. Even when there's not a particular reason or necessity to do it, sometimes I'll just start with the second statement just because sometimes interesting things are hidden there. The test writers know what they're doing. They know that most people default to the first statement first. Yeah, P can be positive or negative. Absolutely. Very good note. I always really try to keep track of that because it's easy to make assumptions that it's a positive number. In this case too, we're looking at integers, right? So it'd be easy to assume that P is an integer when in fact it is not. So we are trying to learn whether P is an integer. I really like, Nicholas, that you started with statement 2, so I'm going to do the same. All right. Now, when I am understanding this problem, I'm noticing first off that this is pretty simple. Like, this is pretty straightforward. Is P an integer? It's a yes/no question. Doesn't give me any information really. Very straightforward. I'm looking at the statements and they are also surprisingly simple. That tells me a couple of interesting things. The first interesting thing is that this probably isn't going to be wildly time consuming as a question because I feel like I can understand it pretty quickly. I don't feel like there's a lot of detail here. Because of that fact, I want to proceed cautiously because this feels like a low to maybe moderate, but low moderate type difficulty question. Those are the ones that you want to get right. The questions that hurt you the most when you get them wrong are the ones that are the easiest. And then the other thing I want to keep in mind is that I want to prove insufficient, right? So I'm going to really try to do that versus trying to assume that something is sufficient. All right, statement 2 here, P over 3 is an integer. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can go about this particular statement. So as I look at it and I'm understanding and planning, I'm thinking to myself, ooh, I could set up a table and I could test cases. That's always an option with data, not always. That's almost always an option with data sufficiency. In a problem like this, I definitely could. I'd come up with some values for P, right? But I'm also looking at this and I'm like, oh, could I use some number theory? Could I just kind of approach this from a theoretical perspective? And that to me is really interesting, particularly for this statement. So I'm going to try to set that up. I know that P over 3 equals some integer. So I'm kind of using int here, sort of like a variable almost. Now I'm going to simplify this a little bit by multiplying by 3 on both sides. And basically what I get is that P equals 3 times some integer. Now, if I know that P equals 3 times some integer, does P have to be an integer? In chat, yes or no? What do you guys think? Does P have to be an integer? I'm getting some no's. Do I have anyone voting for yes? I've got a couple of yeses. I've got some no's. I'm getting more yeses now. All right. The yeses have it in this case. If P is 3 times some integer, then I can put in any integer here. We'll put in 1 just for the sake of argument. In this case, P would be 3. Let's call it 2. In this case, P would be 6. No matter what integer you put in here, 3 times any integer is always going to be an integer. An integer times an integer is an integer, forever and ever. So statement 2 here actually is sufficient then. We're going to cross off A, C, E, and we only have B and D to choose from. All right. 3P is an integer. Now this one's a little bit different. So again, we could test cases, and if you did test cases, that is absolutely fine. Here's one note about testing cases that I want everyone to keep in mind though, because it's an important one. You have to start with what you know. Start with the information that you are given. In this case, we know 3P. We don't know anything about P. A lot of people are tempted to start a testing cases table, and they start with P here and then 3P. Yikes, that's going to lead you potentially to disaster. Thank you so much for asking that. Yeah, why can ACE be crossed out? Because of what the answer choices represent. So if we look at this table, A is statement 1 alone, B is statement 2 alone, C is both statements together, D is either statement alone, and E is not enough. Like neither statement, even combined, is going to give you enough information to answer the question. So if statement 2 is sufficient, then statement 1 alone is not going to be the answer, right? Because we know that statement 2 is enough. So it still could be B, because we don't know about statement 1 yet. It's not going to be A. It's not going to be C, because we're not going to get to the point where we combine those pieces of information yet. It could be D if statement 1 is also sufficient, and it's definitely not going to be E. So ultimately, we create this little grid, Ducheng, where you can keep track of the answer choices very easily. So I would definitely recommend that you go and check out those answer choice grids. It's either going to be B, D, A, C, E if you start out with the second statement, or A, D, B, C, E. This is if you start with statement number 1. Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Okay, back to what I was saying about start with what you know. If you're creating your testing cases table, if you're not creating a table to test cases, oof, go and practice making tables, seriously. You'll save yourself some hassle. You start with what you know. So that means I'm going to start with 3P and then extrapolate P from there. And then I want to make sure that I put my question into this table as well, because I'm a human, much like most of you, I hope. And as a human, my brain is very fallible. I forget things easily. So I put the question in here because I don't want to forget what it is. I don't want to forget what my goal is. So if I start with 3P being an integer, in chat quickly, write down some integers. What are some integers that you know? You all know some. What's your favorite? What's your favorite integer? Oh my gosh, Benny, those integers. Wow. Yeah, okay. We're getting all kinds of answers here. I am inclined to typically stick with the simplest integers when I'm testing cases like this. So I'm almost always going to start with 1, 2, 3. Now, we had a note earlier that this could be positive or negative, which is absolutely true. However, my instinct on this problem tells me that I don't think we're being tested on positives and negatives. I think we're being tested on fractions and integers. So I'm not really concerned about negatives at the moment. If I decide that that is something I need to be worried about, then I will test some negative cases as Great, so if 3p is 1, then p is going to equal 1 over 3. Then we answer the question, is p an integer? No. 2 is really going to, oops, sorry. Nope, that's right. Is really going to give me a similar outcome, right? I'm going to get 2/3 instead. I'm still going to have a no answer. So does anyone know what I'm looking for here? Because I'm trying to prove that this is not sufficient, right? So what kind of an answer do I want next? Oh, Benny, thank you. Nailed it. I'm looking for a yes. Like, I want this yes. I'm searching for it. And luckily, this next case here gives me the yes that I'm looking for. So that makes statement 1 not sufficient. For those of you new to data sufficiency, this is a maybe. You know what I mean? If you ask me to go to the movies and I say, yeah, but only if the movie is a Western and only if you go after 8 p.m. and only, that's not a yes, that's a maybe at best. This also, not a firm yes or no, because in some cases it's no, in some cases it's yes. It's not enough information to really concretely answer the question. That means that the answer for this particular problem is going to be B. So what I want you to think about now is what your approach looked like and whether you spent enough time understanding and planning. The understanding phase should have been looking at the information that you had here and just really thinking about what it meant. What's being tested? Like I said, yeah, I don't think it's really testing positives and negatives, though. I think it's testing fractions and integers. Where's the complexity? In this case, nowhere. It's all pretty simple. The planning is how are you going to approach each statement, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to make a testing cases table? I did that for statement 1. For statement 2, I did something a little bit different with theory. I could have gone with testing cases or both. I could have gone with this theory approach for both. Ultimately, what matters most is that you choose a plan that works best for you. Jessica, if I could prove no with either, would it be D? Yes, good question. A no answer does not mean insufficient, but you have to get a no all the way through, right? If your answer to this question is no, that's absolutely fine. That's an answer to the question. That's what you're looking for. Here, I just can't answer the question concretely. So because I have this mix of yeses and nos, that's really the problem. And that's also why I put the question in here, because I get confused sometimes and like, well, I answered no. Does that mean it's not sufficient? And that's an easy thing to do, an easy mistake to make. A no answer is not an insufficient. Danny, I just saw your other question about the second statement being a mixed number. I'm trying to think about exactly what you mean here. For the second statement, can P be a mixed number? I'm gonna think about this one a little bit more while you guys answer another question here and get back to you on that. I just need to read through it a couple of times to see what you're meaning. Okay, I'm gonna give you a breakdown of what I thought about for this problem, just so that you have it kind of in writing. When I understand, I typically try to really make my understanding process even very structured. And I do this too, because when I see quant problems come on the screen, I typically do feel that time pressure, right? Like I'm feeling I only have 2 minutes and I can't panic. I cannot afford to panic. So to keep myself calm and to keep myself focused, this is what I do. I go through a process every single time. I follow that process and it really brings me both a lot of comfort, but also a lot of efficiency. It's kind of like going through like an assembly line where everyone is doing the same thing over and over. You get very efficient at doing that thing. Okay, so I understood this was a yes/no question to the point of some of you. What's it testing? Fractions and integers. I remind myself not to make assumptions. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna want to assume that P is an integer, so I cannot do that. Where is the complexity? It's a simple question stem and simple statements. Difficulty, this one seems simple, so it seems easy, so I need to be careful because I need to get this one right. Plan, could I use a theoretical approach? For statement 2, I decided to go in that direction, and then it also looks like a good opportunity to test cases, so I moved in that direction as well. When I'm solving, I basically create a very careful, organized testing cases table, which is exactly what you saw me do previously. Jessica, I saw you follow up as well. I'm going to take a look at this question and think about it as you all attempt another question here. So much fun with the GMAT, right? I hope you all enjoy the GMAT. I mean, I'm assuming that at least some of you do, since you're here at, what, 8:30 Eastern time on a Thursday evening? I hope somebody's having fun. All right, you all are going to take a look at another question. Priyanka, thank you. I'm glad that you are. What I would love for you to do is focus on understanding and planning. So for this next problem, if you don't get it right, if you don't get any answer at all, that is absolutely fine. What I want you to really, really concentrate on, though, is making sure that you understand the information presented and that you create a rock solid plan to approach the problem, okay? All right. Let the games begin. Take another deep breath. I'm moving on to the next screen. And your time is going to start right now. All right, that is 2 minutes. I just launched the polling again because I was taking another look at the Q&A. Danny, I just responded to your question. I think what happened here is that you chose a mixed number. That mixed number does simplify down to an integer. So you chose 9/3. It still satisfies the conditions that we need to meet, though, because 9/3 would simplify down to simply the integer 3. In terms of looking at statement 2, then you can certainly test some cases, and I would look at them after we're done here if I were you, and just kind of test whether you can come up with any fractions that work. But that's why I chose the theory on that one instead of testing cases, because I looked at it and I realized if I multiply by 3 on both sides, this has to work out. P absolutely has to be an integer every single time. So you should not find any cases in which P is a fraction. And if you do, it might just be because that fraction simplifies down to an integer. All right, in chat, before I talk about this problem, what I would like you to tell me is, do you think that you had understood the information and that you had a good plan to solve? Yes or no, yay or nay? Benny, you even shared how you did it. Yeah, excellent. Chandana, no, why did you think that you did not? If you're open to sharing. This is an acquired skill, by the way. This isn't something that I'm just good at doing. I've had some tutoring students tell me, yeah, but I'm just not good at thinking this way. And I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't either. When I first started studying for the GMAT, I wasn't getting 760s on my practice tests. I was scoring right around like 600 level. But I worked really, really hard and I got good at training my brain to think in this way. Okay, Jessica, I like that. You had a good plan, but you needed more time to solve. You answered quickly. Okay. And that's the part that you'll get faster at, honestly. The understanding and planning phases will get faster the more that you practice doing this. That's truly the case in at least every instance that I've seen. Awesome. So we're going to take a look at this together. We're all in this together. Is that like the official slogan of COVID? That's probably why I just said that, right? It's like so incepted into my brain now. I think I saw it at like a bank the other day, and I was like, really? I don't think that you've been with me here. Oh, our High School Musical. Yeah. Jessica, great question. Can I review the theoretical here too? It really depends. So different questions are going to have different approaches that kind of lend themselves better. So let's take a look at this one. I'm going to start with just understanding the information here. If X, Y, and Z are positive integers, integers. This is like a gift that's given to you by the GMAT gods. Like if you see positive integers, then you're like, great. Negatives aren't being tested, fractions aren't being tested. I need to really just take a moment and be thankful because this makes my life so much easier. Is X plus Y times Z greater than, whoa, complex. So what I'm noticing right away is that this information makes my life easier, but is also introducing some complexity. Then I'm looking at the statements and I'm seeing that they are super, super simple, extremely simple. And that gives me pause, right? Not puppy pause. Gives me a reason to stop. It gives me pause because when I see that there's a lot of complexity here, I want to make it easier for myself. I don't want that complexity. I don't like it. So as Benny said, and a couple of others here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to simplify this information first. And by information, that's really kind of a misnomer, I guess, in this case. This is the question. So I'm going to carry the question mark through, but I'm going to see if I can simplify it in any way. I'm not going to negate any rules, though, of math. So, like, I still have to just follow the rules. I can't change anything, ultimately, right? I can't change the question in terms of the relationships, but I can simplify. So what I can do first here, I notice, is that I can carry this z through. So I can say xz plus yz. Doesn't change anything, just changes the way that it's represented. And I don't forget my question mark because I don't want to confuse myself and think that this is information. Here I'm noticing that I have a yz and a zy. That's the same thing. That eliminates from both sides. So now I have, is xz greater than xy question mark? My x's are getting all smushy. xz greater than xy. I noticed that somebody had stopped here, but you can take this one step farther. Shouldn't it be ZX in the second half? Yeah, it should. You are absolutely right. Thank you. This is a really good moment to talk about how important it is to keep your work organized. XY plus XZ. And again, it doesn't matter which way you write it, right? I'm going to write it XZ because ultimately that's what I'm going to subtract here. And I got myself confused the first time. Thank you for pointing it out, simply because I didn't extend my line far enough. All right, so then what I'm left with is YZ greater than XY question mark. I noticed somebody stopped here at this point. You can also just divide out a Y. You are allowed to do this for one reason, because you know that Y is positive. If we did not know Y's sign, I would need two cases, one in which Y was positive, one in which Y was negative. Because with an inequality, the sign flips if you divide by a negative. So keep that in mind. I know that I can do this because they're positive integers. That simplifies the Y's here, the Y's here. My final question is Z greater than X question mark? Hey, which statement should I start with? Yeah, I should start with statement 2. Absolutely. And statement 2 is going to be sufficient all day long, right? It literally is just a perfect match for my question. Is Z greater than X? X? Yeah, Z is greater than X. Very clear, sufficient. Hallelujah. Again, I'm writing this B, D, A, C, E grid. I can cross off A, C, and E because it's either going to be B or D as my final answer here. When I take a look at statement 1, Y is greater than X, my final question here, and this is my new question, I'm ignoring the original one because this is the simplified version. All I'm being asked about is a relationship between Z and X, but in statement 1, I get a relationship between Y and X. Not sufficient. This does not give me what I'm looking for. So ultimately here, just like the previous one, the answer is going to be B. In this case, noting that there was complexity in the question stem gave me a lot more ability to be successful quickly. So this is exactly what I mean by if you spend more time understanding and planning than you do on solving, that can be okay, because to solve here took me 20 seconds probably to think about it, right? But if you took a minute and a half to understand and plan really thoroughly, and then those 20 seconds to solve, well, you're in great shape. You're in great shape at that point. Jessica, what was your plan out of curiosity if you did not simplify? Did you test cases, like plug in numbers? Okay. Yeah, and this is a great opportunity to just think about alternatives, right? So if you think of one thing first and you're like, I could test cases, just pause for just a second and say, you know what, I have a little bit more time to understand and plan. Tiffany told me I did. She gave me the go ahead. What else is there? What else could I do to make my life easier? I am a good GMAT test taker because I am just a little bit lazy. Like I would rather think about it a little bit longer and do a lot less work. And that honestly on the GMAT works out very well in most cases. All right, I'm going to do the same thing that we did previously and show you what my thought process is, just laid out in text so that you have it. This was again a yes/no question. Where was it complex? It was complex in the question stem, and that told me I needed to simplify or rephrase. What's it testing? Inequalities. Normally you see an inequality and it means that it's testing positives and negatives. That is a good thing to keep in mind. Inequality, positives, negatives. But in this case, X, Y, and Z were positive integers, and I was told that. So that's not really what it was testing. Difficulty here seems low to moderate. So I want to make sure that I get this one right as well, just like the previous problem that we saw. The plan here could maybe be testing cases, but I need to see what happens when I actually rephrase. So as solving, I rephrase carefully, then I can see if I need to set up a testing cases table. And in this case, I did not, which made me feel really happy. All right. We, my friends, are going to do one more problem. Who's excited? Who's excited about one more problem? I am. All right. Take a deep breath. I'll take one too. Okay, I am moving on to the next screen, and your time is going to start right now. And that was your 2 minutes. All right, we are a little bit more aligned on this problem in terms of answer choices, it looks like. I have a good number of answers for B right now. Are you guys choosing B because the previous two were B? All right. Let's take a look at this one. Again, understand, plan. Those are your goals, right? So in chat, please quickly tell me, what did you understand? Again, no wrong answers, right? I'm not looking for any just one particular thing. And the more that you start to notice this and pay attention to what you're understanding and what you're seeing in the problem itself, the more that you're going to get better at noticing new things that you didn't think were important. Or that you didn't know were important, I guess. Yeah, the book costs 25% higher than M. Ooh, and that's an interesting one to notice, right? We have a switch here where a used bookseller purchased 50 copies of a book for a total of M euros, and then sold each book for 25% more than the original per book purchase. So the sale of each book was 25% higher, but the M actually is in terms of all of the books, not each individual book, it looks like. Priyanka, determine cost price first. What do you mean by that? I will start to write as you type. Cost per book. Yeah, that's definitely going to be part of our goal here, right? So here are the things that I'm noticing. I'm noticing some of the same things that you all are. And a lot of you chose B, and I think it's the same reason that Nicholas wrote this here. I got M times 1.25. When I'm reading through this, What I'm saying first is that it changes, right? So I have that this used bookseller purchased 50 copies for a total of €M. And then we switch to looking at it on a book level. And the final question is, for how many euros did she sell each book? And that's what my answer choices represent. So we've got this interesting switch here. Something happens, right? Ultimately, Jessica, I love this. Yeah, I set M equal to a number. Ultimately, the thing that I'm also noticing, because I always look at the answer choices, that's part of understanding. Understanding is not just about the information that you're given. You have to look at the answer choices as well. That's information too. So I'm looking at the answer choices and I'm seeing M appear in all of them, and I'm seeing M appear in the question stem itself. M is never one particular real number, which means that I get to create my own number, and that makes me feel really happy because smart numbers are a really good way to solve problems. Jessica, what number did you choose for M? Oh, warms my heart. She used 100. Yeah, I would use 100 in this problem as well. The reason for that, so I've moved past the understand phase and I'm in the plan phase right now. I'm thinking in the plan phase, ooh, if I'm going to choose smart numbers, I think that might be a good approach here because of what I've noticed. But I know that to choose smart numbers, I can't use numbers that are actually used in the problem because weird things happen. I want to use numbers that work really cleanly with what I have presented as well. I see 25% here. 100 always works well with percents. I see 50 copies of a book. I'm thinking, wow, 100 is an awesome number to use in this case. So if I say M equals 100, then my cost, my original cost per book equals $100 over 50 books, right? So that's $2 per book. Now, each book sold for 25% more than the purchase. So my sale price per book equals this plus another 25%. In chat, who knows what that is? This is important because this problem is testing percents, right? It's testing fractions and percents. This should be math that you are mostly comfortable with doing. Yeah, I'm seeing 250. That's absolutely correct. 25%, you just divide something by 4, right? So if I divide 2 by 4, then that's 50 cents. So each book is going to sell for $2.50. Now, my answer choices represent this. For how many euros did she sell each book, right? $2.50 is that answer. So when I'm using smart numbers, I need to plug in M and I need to get $2.50. So I'm going to write my goal over here, and then I'm going to start plugging in M's. I'm looking at A and I'm already seeing that this is way off kilter. So I wouldn't even look at A any further, but just for giggles right now, we'll do the math. That's 25, it's too high. 5 times 100 over 4, I'm not going to do this math because it's just clearly too high. C is starting to look really good, right? 100 over 40, I'm going to get rid of these zeros, so then it's 10 over 4. That looks pretty close. Now, I could simplify this down, and I'm going to see that it is 2.5. Alternatively, you could look at D, clearly not it. It's just going to become a huge number. E also is going to be 125 over, what, 200? This is going to be too small. This is going to be under $1. So it ultimately has to be C, and you don't have to do a ton of math. You can kind of just estimate a little bit and see what works out the best. All right. Again, what I'm going to do is show you on this next screen what my thought process was here. What's it testing? Fractions and percents. This is a fraction percent problem all the way. It's important that you know that, by the way. So when you're looking at a problem, you should know what's being tested because that should inform what your plan is. If you can get a good sense for what's being tested, then you already have kind of a one-up on the test writers. You can figure out a good plan. Important information, I noted here that the problem switches from total for all books to each book. So I was like, I need to be careful about this. Difficulty, this seems somewhat difficult, but a good plan I knew might make it easier. And I ultimately decided on smart numbers, which is a great plan. So I knew that I could get this one right, regardless of whether it was a really difficult problem. And you won't know that for sure, but it is important to estimate the difficulty when you're understanding, because you want to know if it's a problem that you should bail on, like a very hard problem. If it's an easy problem, then you want to know to slow down and give it everything you've got. Make sure that you get it right. Plan, I inserted a smart number for M, and I realized good smart numbers should be easy to work with, should not use numbers from the problem. So ultimately I settled on 100. And then when solving, I just made sure that I was very careful, right? And I wrote the number, the goal that I was looking for, to make sure that I didn't get confused. How do you know when you can insert a number? Jessica M, great question. Let me go back to this problem. I know that I can use a smart number because M is never defined. They never tell me specifically what M is. I see it used in the question here, and then I see it appear in the answer choices, and that's a dead giveaway to me. That's a smart numbers problem. I get to define what M means. I get to choose a specific number. You can approach this algebraically, but it gets really nasty, and there's just no point. Don't do that to yourselves, please. All right. My friends, this went by so quickly. I'm going to take you to one last slide with some specific takeaways here. When you see any quant problem, I really want you to think, understand, plan, solve, because this framework truly is your guide to being successful in quant problems and to saving time. Ultimately, you can waste a bunch of time on a quant problem. If you're understanding and planning first, though, then you're realizing, hey, I should bail. Or you're realizing, oh, you know what, I have a really good plan. I'll solve very carefully. When you realize that you can't understand a problem, you should bail. When you realize that you don't have a good plan to solve a problem, you should bail. So these are some good key takeaways. A lot of people too, I know, say, hey, I know when to bail, and I definitely try to bail, but then I look at their practice tests and I see that they're really not doing it as much as they think. So I would challenge you on your next practice test as well to just write a little letter B down on your yellow pad if you're using a yellow pad, or on your whiteboard if you're taking the online GMAT, and write like 4 letter B's, right? Because you should be bailing on probably at least 4 problems in the quant section. You're going to miss a whole lot more than that. So you might as well choose the problems that you do miss. And then every time you bail on a problem, cross off a B so that you know you bail on at least 4 throughout that section. Jara, your process was M over 50, and adding 25% decreases the denominator. Did you get the right answer when you carried it out? Because that would be the tell, I suppose, right? That would depend on how you carried this out. I know, Jessica, that's always the fear, right? Bailing on an easy question. That's why you're assessing. You're like, what do I think this question's difficulty is? Because if it is easy, you want to make sure you get it right. You know, you can't get it perfectly though. So ultimately, you just have to get really good at identifying. It's a good idea to go through the official guide, go through your previous practice exams as well, and go problem by problem and estimate the difficulty level to yourself without being able to see it, and then take a look and see if you're about approximately correct. You got it correct on a very hypothetical level. I would take another look at that. It sounds like it could potentially work. However, I would say that the smart numbers approach here is a really, really clean approach and something that you know is going to work. So I would work on your solution and make sure that you can work it out on a less hypothetical level. And then I would also say practice the smart numbers approach to that problem as well, because ultimately that's going to serve you on a whole lot of other problems in the future too. So you should get good at that. Yeah. Benny, how would I advise you to split your time evenly? Evenly is my answer. You want to make sure that you're getting to the final questions with enough time to answer them and like give them a good solid effort. So what you want to do is make sure that those questions, you have a full 2 minutes per question for the last, I'd say 4 or 5. It's not that those questions weigh more, it's that you can't recover from them, right? So early on, if you're making mistakes, like you have a ton of opportunities to recover and get up into higher difficulty questions. At the end of the exam, you only have a few chances left. So you want to make sure that those chances are really, you take them, right? Ooh, integrated reasoning. We don't do a ton of free prep hours on integrated reasoning, but I'll definitely think about that one. My recommendation for that section, Jessica, is to make sure that you bail on at least a few problems. The IR section is tough because it's very quick. It's not adaptive like the other sections. If you bail on a few problems, you ultimately should be able to invest enough time on the remaining problems to be totally fine. So plan on skipping at least 2 or 3 problems in the IR section. Ultimately, too, this is kind of a mix of skills, both quant and verbal. So many people don't have to spend a lot of time studying for IR. If you skip those problems and if you study quant and verbal, typically that can be enough. We do offer a book as well. A 5 is actually fine, honestly. For IR, 5 and up is typically seen as like, that's reasonable. If you're aiming for a job in consulting, you may want to get a 6 or higher, just because I've heard that sometimes consulting firms will look back at your IR scores, but that's not a common practice, I don't think. Yeah, we do have an IR and essay book as well that we offer, so you could purchase that and it gives some information about how to approach that section effectively. But ultimately bailing, oh, awesome, okay, read that. Ultimately bailing on a few problems is like truly the way to go for IR. All right, excellent. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I will be having another session coming up in July. You can go out to the free resources webpage and check it out. Absolutely, it's truly my pleasure. I love teaching these. So please send me any thoughts as you leave about topics that you'd like to see for the future. I'll definitely consider them because my July session is not set in stone yet in terms of my topic. Oh, linear equations. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to head out here. Thank you all for joining. Until next time.